Standing in front of London Bridge this week, not in the UK obviously, but just outside of Queanbeyan, New South Wales, Australia, a beautiful little wonder of the world. We've just had the first controversy stories. Matthew in his gospel puts together 4 of them. He has the 4 controversy stories coming just after some parables. The last one we heard about was the invitation to the wedding. It's a magnificent thing to think about, that God is inviting us to his son's wedding, the wedding of Christ with us, humanity. We shouldn't miss it. Make sure we respond with a yes to the invitation by the Father to the son's wedding. And then we have the 4 controversy stories. The first one we had last week was on the poll tax. And Jesus says, well, on the coin, whose inscription do you find? And they said, well, Caesar's. He said, right, we'll give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and then give to God what belongs to God. And of course, the early theologians reflected on this and said, well, actually etched onto every human being is the image of God. So that's what he's talking about there. We've got to give ourselves back to God because we've come from God. And this will be an interplay of our freedom. The early fathers of the church beautifully reflected on this mystery that we are made in God's image and likeness. So the likeness part is our task. Whether we become like God depends on our freedom and our interplay with God's freedom and grace and love. So that's very important. The next controversy story is about the resurrection. We don't read about it this week. I'd encourage you to go and have a look at it, though, the mystery of the resurrection, what's going to happen there. And then we come to today's controversy story. What is the great commandment? What is the greatest commandment, they asked Jesus. And he says, well, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and strength, and to love your neighbour as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang the whole law and the prophets. It's a bit like a peg. You've got a piece of clothing, a piece of clothing that won't function. It's got 2 parts to it, but it won't function unless you've got both parts, and the peg is holding it together. That's quite a good image, I think. It might be helpful. Perhaps you can think of other images yourself in order to explain to people. So the commandments came to Moses originally as 10 words, the experts tell us, 10 words. The first 3 dealing with God, the second 7, or the second part of the Decalogue, the 10 words dealing with our relationship with our neighbour. The first 3 deal with God, secondly, his name, reverence for his name, and thirdly, reverence for his day. So we celebrate that as Christians on Sunday. Most important that we make it a day of rest and also a day of a Eucharistic love, by getting to the Eucharist, participating, receiving the Eucharist. And then the second part of the Decalogue, those other 7 commandments, deal with our relationship with each other. So honour thy father and mother, relationships within families and marriages. Thou shalt not kill. Very important in free societies that there is no violence. It's not tolerated, either in action or word. The 6th is sexual fidelity, which is most important in this time of great breakdown of sexual values. And then 7th, property, the importance of property in free societies and its orientation to the common good. And then 8th, of course, deals with the gift of speech. We shall speak the truth to one another in love. We won't deceive each other. Most important, as you can see. And Jesus then says, well, look, you've not only got to know about these commandments and obey them, but you've got to love them. And this will be the secret to a happy life, loving these fundamental human values. So they came to us originally as a word, and then we expounded them into the 10 commandments. So we should finish on really remembering that it's most important that we understand the importance in history of a word. A word, in fact, is the most important, powerful thing in history, no doubt about it. A word spoken with love and truth and hope is the thing that actually builds communities together. We should remember, finally, that this is how God actually is within himself. God the Father expresses himself as a person, as it belongs to persons to do. Persons express themselves, and God is a person. He expresses himself so perfectly that it's a word person. That's it. And then the love between them, because God is love, says St. John, the love between them is in fact the Holy Spirit. So that's an explanation of the Trinity. And the Trinity then expresses itself in human history. So that's why Jesus is saying to us, look, these are the 2 commandments. These are the 2 words that will lead us all to a magnificent life, a life of happiness and peace, love of God and love of neighbour. It doesn't get any better.